Welcome back to another Pinal's People episode. Today we are at the Pinal County Historical Society Museum in Florence. Our guest is Cathy Adam, president of the Pinal County Historical Society and Museum. Cathy has been a resident of Florence and has worked to assist in historical preservation efforts in the area for some years now. She formerly served as a vice chairman of the Florence Historic District Advisory Commission and is now the vice chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission here in Florence. Cathy, thank you so much for inviting us here and for joining us on Pinal's People.
Welcome.
So to get started, I'd love to, for our viewers who might not be familiar with you and your work, I'd love to get a little bit more information about you. From what I know, you're actually from the East Coast, and your father had an interesting connection to Pedro Guerrero. So could you share a little bit about yourself and your work?
So a lot of people ask me how I ended up here. As you know, probably most of the people here today in Arizona came from somewhere else. So I was born in New York City. I was raised on the Hudson River, beautiful, beautiful place. And when I finished working for IBM, I retired. And meanwhile, my dad had purchased a historic adobe home here in Florence, which also happened to be where Pedro Guerrero retired. So Pedro was Frank Lloyd Wright's personal photographer, as well as a very well-known landscape architecture photographer. And he had retired out here. My dad came to visit, and he liked it so much, he bought an old adobe and wanted to restore it. So he unfortunately passed away before I could retire, but in honor of him, I came out here to restore the house and never left.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And so tell me a little bit about your work. How did you get into historical preservation here?
Well, having an old house, and it is very true, that movie, The Money Pit, it had a huge crack in the wall. And this is historic adobe, so it's different than the newer adobes, and you really need a specialist to work on it. So I looked all over to find somebody, and there was an article in the newspaper, the Florence Blade, that Mark Callan had written about the Chapel of the Gila, that is a historic chapel that had been restored by Reggie McKay. So I called him up. He came and he fixed my house, and that started me down the path, because if you go down our main street, we have one of the few main streets, historic districts that's still a working main street, right? So we have no bypasses. We still have our post office is on Main Street, our bank is on Main Street, and our hardware store. So it's a beautiful historic district, and I think it's worth preserving.
Yeah, absolutely. I am curious, because you mentioned, of course, having an old home, but was this something that you were interested in even before you moved to Florence? No,
I'm a city kid.
Yeah.
Had no interest, and I really had intended to come out here, as I said, and honor my dad, finish his project, and go back east. But I will tell you, I got very interested in learning about adobe. I am asthmatic, and when you have true old adobe, there are no chemicals, and it's a true limestone on the outside of my house, so there's no chemical. And if you get VOC-free paint, I don't use an inhaler anymore. That's the difference going back to the old ways of doing things makes, right? And I just absolutely fell in love with it. And as I say, our Main Street has probably the most still in use commercial adobes in the state. But they do disintegrate if you don't take care of them. So, hence I got on the advisory commission to try to save the ones that we could.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I had no interest. I really don't even like a yard. I'm kind of an apartment kind of person.
Yeah, that's understandable. Growing up on the East Coast will do that to you, right?
And I never saw dust like this. I mean, this was really new to me, but I love it here.
Yeah.
I love it. I do. Even in the heat, I'm a year-rounder, and I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. And so going from having an old home and sort of seeing the importance of trying to preserve the historic district here in Florence, how did it come about you getting involved with the Historical Society and the museum?
I say I missed a meeting and became the president. Of course, I'm interested in the history of the place, and Florence has quite an interesting history as well as diverse. So I used to come to their events on Sundays. When I came out here, I knew nobody. The only person I knew was Pedro Guerrero, who was my father's friend, and you don't really hang out with your dad's friends. So I started going to these local events, and I loved the museum. I had no intention of, I was retired, and I like being retired. But, this place was too special. And what had happened was a lot of people were aging out. It was still special, but it takes a lot of work to keep a nonprofit going today. This museum is not affiliated with the county of Pinal. It has no funding outside of what we earn. So it's after COVID, we're still recovering, as many cultural organizations are, but we're holding our own so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And how's that recovery process been for you guys?
Really tough. Really, really tough. I thank the government for the CARES money that got us through. We only have 1.4 paid employees, and that's our biggest concern because it's all dependent on admissions at the door and donations. Well, with COVID, it really not only hit our admissions, it hit our membership because a lot of our members are snowbirds and they weren't traveling, so they did not renew their memberships. So, and this is a tough year with inflation and after the price of gas, right? I understand people don't have the extra money, so we have to really work to earn every dollar. And then we just had our biggest event of the year on Saturday, which is our Day of the Dead. And I don't know if you're from around here, but it was the most horrific torrential downpour I have ever seen. So that kind of put a dent in our attendance. It's tough, but that's just the way it is. We said, you know what? We're no longer talking about COVID and before COVID. This is life now, right? So we have to make this work, given that we're going to have a lower attendance. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, though, when you first came here, you saw how special this place was. Could you speak to me a little bit about that and, what you would share with people either in our community or people even from out of our community, why this place is so special?
I think, number one, this is the friendliest town. And I guess a little bit of having the big city influence, I really didn't understand what rural America was all about. I think you have to live there. Visiting and driving through isn't the same. And so when I came here, I sat at the coffee shop where today's the Fudge Shop outside, and I met the mayor. I met the chief of police. We have this very big concert, Country Thunder, in our backyard. And I said to the chief, I said, well, I really would like to go, but I'm all by myself. You think I'll be all right? And he said, just stay out of the campgrounds. You'll be fine. And so, it's that kind of thing where I was never afraid to go out, even by myself. Yeah. And then when I was working on my house, which is on the main drag on Ruggles, we were tearing off the top of the parapet. And this woman comes walking by because we get all of our mail from the post office. So it's a gathering place. You get to meet everybody. And we started talking, and we're talking about my love of music. Turns out she's a master musician, guitarist, and also happened to be one of the first women competitive motorcycle racers in the world.
Oh, wow.
We had a few years ago at our home tour a quick draw, which was just for artists to come and, and you have, I think, 2 hours and you draw something. I was absolutely astounded at the talent we have in this town. It's unbelievable how many people ended up here with huge talents and, like I say, hugely diverse backgrounds from all over the world. It's really an amazing place.
Yeah, absolutely. And so another thing I'd love to know from you is, so from your involvement in historical preservation here in this community, could you talk a little bit about why you think that's so important, especially nowadays?
I really feel this not just in terms of historic preservation of buildings, because a building's just a building, but I think when you don't know your past and you lose that very physical, tangible connection to your past, you don't know where you're going. And I will point to cities like Phoenix and Dallas and Atlanta, and I don't want to disparage them, but they don't have the typical cultural background as a Tucson does, for instance. To me, they're centers of commerce. And they're lacking that spirit and neighborhood and grit of the people who came before, because they're mostly all transient, right? So I really like to go back, and that's, if you look around this museum, we are very proud of the fact that probably at least 85% of the artifacts we have in here were personally given to us by families who live here.
Yeah.
So we have that connection, right? And we continue to encourage that connection with their descendants.
Yeah. And actually going off of that too, so what's your favorite thing about being the president of this museum?
None.
None whatsoever?
No, it's not a dream of mine. I have to say, though, it is a joy and really an honor to work with this team. This is, when I was working, it's a multinational company. I had groups all over the world. And naturally, there's some, tensions and whatever. I have never worked with a group of people like we have here. Very, very, very different people. We are mostly type A personalities. We are mostly women, and not one clash. And the spirit of get up and go. I am telling you, when that torrential rain came down, I am one of the younger ones. We hauled tents, chairs, tables out there. We had to haul them all back in. We just set up in here. And we had the thing inside, and everyone just pitched in. We were all dead the next day, but everyone here just pitches in. You never have to ask twice.
Yeah.
And the knowledge they have. Several people were teachers in their past lives. We have PhDs. We have an ex-principal. We have art majors. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of talent. So that's a thrill. That is a real thrill. And now if we can close the red ink, I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's understandable. Well, so what is, since, you've spoken so highly of Florence, I'm curious, what's your favorite thing about living in Florence?
Oh, again, it's the connection to history. It really is. And for me, it might sound funny, but my parents were the outliers, and they moved from California. My family background is farming in Southern California. And the first time I came to Florence, it looked exactly like my grandmother's house. Dirt roads, right? All green, farms predominantly. I would say bungalow type houses. I mean, they're adobes, but small. You don't have big complexes. We're only now getting into the master plan communities, but I think that that's part of the charm of Florence. We can do both, right? So it was really wonderful, but I mean, it took me right back to when I was a kid on the farm.
What's something you wish more people knew about the Pinal County Historical Museum?
That were here. There are 2 museums in town, and one is McFarland State Park, which is a wonderful state park, and they do a wonderful job, but it's more centered on McFarland himself, Ernest McFarland. Of course, we are primarily focused on Florence, but also because we were the first cultural organization in the county, we tried to represent the whole county. Well, as other museums came into being, like the Casa Grande Museum and Coolidge, et cetera, we backed off of them. We gave them their artifacts, and we just more concentrate on this. But we have things like the Ray mine, where they've pretty much, I guess they moved the town, and so it doesn't exist anymore. We have artifacts from Randolph. I mean, the ones that don't have their own historical societies. So we still do try and cover the county. It is an amazing, I mean, if you see, we go from the Hohokam days, right, up until really the 40s, I think, is about where we stopped. And that's just a function of we're out of space. We are still collecting in the back, but we have no more room to exhibit.
Yeah, that's understandable. And I remember my other question. So it was about your work with the Historic District Commission here. And so could you tell people a little bit about, what was serving on that board? How many years did you serve on it?
I think it was 6, but I'm not exactly, they just kind of blend together.
Yeah, after a while, that's understandable. But that's still a great chunk of time. So could you tell people a little bit about, what was, I guess, either about a project that mattered to you a lot serving on that commission, or some goal that you guys accomplished that you feel has made Florence kind of better for it?
Well, I think it's one that went on for over 10 years, and we call it the building with 100 lives. There's a building, it's called the Quinn Building, C-U-E-N. And when I was on the Historic District Advisory Commission, one of the duties of the commission is to say yay or nay if anybody wants to demolish a historic building. So these are all plaqued buildings. We have over 125 buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Structures. So if you want to destroy it, you have to come through our commission to get our okay. And we said, no, 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 no. And finally the town told us, well, it's a danger to pedestrians. It's going to fall on somebody. So once they say that, we had to give the okay. Even after that, a gentleman stepped forward to try and save it. That didn't work, so they were getting ready to knock it down, and we had a little protest. There were all of about 10 of us walking up and down the street. But at the end of the day, the former president who preceded me of this museum, Lynn Smith and her husband Tom, stepped up, bought the building, and restored it. It is today a flower shop, and it is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the timeline of we did lose one building when I was on the Historic Commission, but you're really trying to save the buildings that you can. And we all work desperately hard on the home tour, which the town sponsors, but we're involved. There's a committee of people, and we try to bring people in. And the outsiders love our town because we have so many homes to show. Yeah. Right? A lot of homes, I know Casa Grande lost a lot of your homes, but you're doing a lot on your main street and you've got a lot of things going, but not as many homes as we have that get open to the public. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean 125 historic,
yes.
You said? Wow.
Yep.
I mean, that is quite a few. I think that is unique.
And they're all in different stages, right, of, restoration or whatever. And so every year we try to have more new homes on the tour than not. So you're not coming back and seeing the same things all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And so the Quinn House, it's such a special story, like you were saying. And I'm curious, what do you think or what do you wish people would take away from that story?
Anything can be saved. Mm-hmm. Where there's a will, there's a way. And one of the things that grates on me the most, the Clark House, your newspaper's building, that did not have a roof. It only had 2.5 walls standing. Mm-hmm. And it was the center of town for vagrants. And everybody said, knock it down, knock it down. And the citizens rallied, and look at it today. It's a jewel on Main Street. Yeah, yeah. Right? So I think people have to understand that there's no such thing as a knockdown automatically. Mm-hmm. The discussion going on for the Quinn Building on the town council was making it a pocket park. And look at it today. You're coming up, corners are very important because they're so visible. And when you're coming up Main Street, think about if that building wasn't there and there was just nothing but a park bench. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so, Cathy, just one last question. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'd love if you could go a little bit more in depth about it. So Pinal County, of course, is changing dramatically. We have so many tech companies that are moving in and so much new development that's going on. But how do you think understanding and cherishing our history can help us as we move into this new future? Well, I think that's one of the things we have, and I just want to call out. I'm sitting behind this in front of this beautiful poster. Florence is the home to the Junior Parada, mm-hmm. right? And so when you talk about moving the past into the present, a Junior Parada is for children 18 and younger. That's what it is. It's a rodeo. Yeah. Right? And I know you know, but I didn't know that when I came in. There might be other folks from the city. And I went and I was you have never seen anything till you see a 3 or 4-year-old hanging on for dear life to the side of a sheep, and they are not going to let go. It is so precious. But that's a whole way of life. Ranching is still a way of life here, right? And cattle raising. So what we have here, and this again goes back to the family connections. It's called the Whitlow Rodeo Grounds, and Charles Whitlow started this for our young people because, as you can see, we don't have a lot of amenities. We don't have movie theaters. We don't have other things that the cities might have. And so this was a way to keep the young people involved and active in a way of life. We almost lost it, and then his grandson, Bill Foster, stepped up. And he is running today. This is the 90th Junior Parada Rodeo. It is the oldest continuous running rodeo in the country. So that is coming up in November. This is the connection. We have saddles, we have charro suits, we have the ribbons from former paradas. And so Bill has started a whole group of young people bull riding, right? Mm-hmm. Not bulls, but right, taking part in the rodeo. And we have the things from their parents and grandparents that they can show them. Yeah. So many people don't have room for this. That's why there's all those storage lockers. And we have people coming in with precious wedding gowns that the kids don't want. They have no place to keep it. So we've got it here.
Yeah.
But this is really a very, very special event. And I think when you look at communities, if I was looking at a community to come to in Arizona and I had children, this is fresh air, it's open trails, we have hiking, we have the parada. We have things that I think are a unique experience, a family experience for your children that you might not find in a Gilbert or a Queen Creek or Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cathy Adams, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.